was an amazing morning. I think some of us were here at the beginning of this. I know that Kevin won't mind me saying, I'm not sure if he's gone, he's down there, but Kevin and I were in Seattle 6 years ago, just around now, and we were talking about putting our HCI proposal together. Vivian was doing amazing work to try and chaperone us. And then, of course, we heard the first case of COVID in Orange County, and very close to where we were. Kevin and I got home and the world shut down. And I think it was an amazing what's been achieved collectively by everybody in this room over a considerable period of time. And in a funny way, it kind of accelerated some of the things we needed to do, but it also meant a very significant challenge for all of us. So today was really great just to listen and hear and reflect on the MicroCredentials project and just hear what has been happening. I'm also conscious that I say I'm standing between you and lunch, but there's another number going around in my head that I have to share with you. I mean, if you look at our own institutions and you look at the data, and they are publicly available, the employability of our graduates is really high, all of us, and we should take pride in that. But there's a lot of headwinds coming. We can see it. Secondly, and I don't like saying what I'm going to say next, if you look at the employment rate in the country at the moment, unemployment rate is 5%. If you look at the group 18 to 23, it is 13%. So let's take that home, 13%. So what are we going to do to support those learners and support those? So, you know, I think that's something that's really important. We've talked about the future earlier. I was at a meeting with some enterprise people yesterday, and I wrote down one of the quotes one of the business leaders said to me, because we're talking about the future. And he reminded me of a philosopher, Jacques Attali. He said, music makes audible that future that will soon become visible. So music makes audible that future will become visible. And his next comment was, rapping. So where am I going with this? What I'm saying is we've got to listen to the voices of those generations that are our learners. And that's an incredibly dynamic space. This morning we've heard about MicroCredentials, all of it. It's not just a project, it's actually, and it was an incredibly successful project, but it's a collective effort to reimagine how we as universities and all of us work together and how we also respond with QQI and others. Because, you know, this is a developing journey for all of us to make sure that really quality matter that was mentioned a number of times, responding to change of economy, society, and the emerging skills, to the fundamental shifts in how our learners engage with education. In my own leadership team, I've been driving them all mad, and Paul knows because I mentioned at the president's meeting last Friday. And I'd like anybody in the room who's lucky, like I am privileged to have children in my family. If you have a child in your house, whatever age, I'd recommend the following book. It's The 100-Year Life, written by Linda Grattan and Andrew J. Scott. Why is it important? It is important because most children today that are born, even up to the age of 18, are likely to live to 100 years of age. What does that mean? It means they're going to work for 50 years. What does that mean? The old tradition, and I'm one of them, that you educate, you work, and you retire, will not exist. Because simply, how are you going to pay your pension? So it's an amazing book. It maps out the cost of it, it maps out the demographics, it maps out, you've got to keep healthy. And I'm privileged, I have a young daughter at the moment, and I'm kind of saying, is she not going to work? She's been studying, and she's been traveling, and she's running, and Kevin knows her actually by sheer coincidence. She worked, and she'll kill me, don't tell her, Kevin, I'm talking about her. But she went to work in Berlin as an innovation hub and come back and is now upskilling and learning. And when you read this book, and the students, it came out of, Linda Grattan is a professor in the London School of Economics. She speaks at the World Economic Forum. An amazing, extraordinary woman. And what she says these young people are doing, they're less interested in work. That's the first thing. Or their value proposition for work is different, perhaps, than what we might have had, that I would certainly have had. They travel more, but they're building social capital for the future. So the idea of, as I say, work, retire, educate, work, retire won't happen. It'll be educate, drop out, do something different, reskill, upskill, and imagine that doing that for 50 years. Can you imagine how our worlds have changed in the last 50 years? So micro-credentials, amongst a range of other things, are absolutely critical for all of us, including myself. And I was really struck, Kevin, that you've taken the micro-credential. I did see if there's one in music before I come up on rapping, but there isn't, but so someone might have a look at that. So as we live longer, working lives extend, often across multiple careers, the traditional model, as I say, the front-loading education early in life and then relying it until retirement is really out of step with the future. It's out of step right now and into the future for all of us. Learners increasingly need to reskill, upskill throughout their lives, requiring multiple periods of participation in education, whether that's higher education, future education, whatever the case may be. The report launched today, I think, shows how we have shifted in realizing that practice and process to enable that kind of journey to be enabled. Over time, we can see in the fantastic number, 600 micro-credentials and 220 or 20,000 learners across a whole range of areas. And my experience always, I'm sure there's the experience in the room, when somebody takes a course, they want to take another one. They get a feel for what that feels like. And suddenly getting back in, somebody mentioned the word confidence earlier. Really important that we give all our learners confidence. I was really struck by Anne and you making the comment about the research intensity, because all of the IUA universities are incredibly research intensive. All of us have incredibly talented people. And the pace of change in those industries, I'm thinking of our own National Tyndall Institute, for example, the semiconductor industry. People are screaming out for upskilling in all of those areas. So I think we can be really confident as a research-intensive universities that we have a really critical role to play in the skills agenda. And there are other skills that will be relevant for others as well, and that's fine. So as we've seen throughout the micro team, and I'm lucky that some of our own team are here from UCC. I know Mags Arnold led out on our team in UCC, and it was just fantastic to see the strong engagement with enterprise. And Vivian, you mentioned this. I think the deep shift and sustained relationships that have emerged from the micro-credential project, if you like, the byproducts of engaging has been really, really important. Paul, you also mentioned earlier the evolving global environment, and I think that's critical as we continue to make sure that Ireland remains competitive. So people have a good job, good life, good quality of life, but also have a good democracy to live in. That's really important. So one of the micro-credentials we're delivering in UCC, and I come back to Kevin's point about the academies in a moment, is climate diplomacy for the Department of Foreign Affairs. Well, as an ecologist, first of all, and I've worked in climate change, the potential is about 1.2 billion of people are going to move into northwestern regions, into Europe and south, away from a really hostile climate environment into the future. We've got to come to terms of educating people, and we can do this from research-intensive institutions like we have talked about today. The usefulness of the micro-credential not only limited to enterprise, but also can have a huge impact where full-scale courses are not possible. Simply in some of our organizations, you simply can't put out those very large programs that you'd need for, and I love the way you reframed it, Linda, earlier, these other awards that we can give that are outside the frame. If you stop and ask the question in a moment, why is it a level 8 4 years? Just ask that question. And I think I had the conversation with someone earlier, probably about maturity as much as anything else. People mature during that year. Lord Putnam is a great friend of UCC. As he said, there are two kinds of degrees. There's the growing up degree, which is the first one, and then there's the professional degree, which happens after that. And maybe the micro-credential is the other piece after that. In UCC, we've seen firsthand the micro-credential can spark a re-engagement with education, and that's really important, that we don't leave anybody behind. We've had more than 4,000 learners across 120 courses, with nearly 40% of those learners coming back for a second micro-credential. 40%. So we've opened up a door and an opportunity, but equally, we've changed ourselves to make ourselves more available and flexible. One of our micro-credential learners rediscovered their love of learning and has now come back to do a full program. UCC has also had huge success in a prison education system. Learners that don't ordinarily have the opportunity to do a long degree. So prisons are places, those members of society that also deserve the opportunity and include, and I won't do this one, there's a micro-credential on dance practice. So that's back to the rapping music. If you want to do the rap music, you can do a micro-credential in dance practice also. Both gaining national recognition for the transformative impact of short-term learning. This pattern of evidence across all our project partners, all of us, everybody in this room has done an amazing work. And the recipe is a simple one. Courses that quickly deliver what people need in formats that they can readily engage with, which deliver results. And those of us of a certain age might remember an advertisement on television for an alcohol. I know we're not supposed to talk about alcohol. And it was for Martini. Can anybody remember it? Anytime, any place, anywhere. So micro-credentials, any time, any place, anywhere. So let's come back to the mainstreaming then. For universities, micro-credentials sit within a wider shift to lifelong learning, which becomes a central part of how we all deliver our public purpose education. Supported by initiatives such as the MicroCreds Project, institutions are investing significantly in people, systems, digital infrastructure and organizational reform to embed lifelong learning. And I think, as Kevin has mentioned, we have, and all of us are doing different things. I'm not saying we're the best or anything like that. Everybody's got a different approach to this. What we've been doing in University College Cork is we've established a lifelong learning institute to ensure that learners at all stages in the background can have access to those kinds of skills. So we have a skills academy for AI, an academy for sustainability. We're about to do one on semiconductors, and similarly for food and health. So underpinning our UCC Futures, which is our research program. So every one of those, and if we all think about it, I mean, our research should be informing our undergraduate curriculum, and we should provide the evidence for that. It should be informing our postgraduate curriculum, master's and PhD programs. Equally, why wouldn't it inform our micro-credentials? And position all of us for the best opportunity. So I think there's a real opportunity here to do something, and a responsibility actually, just not an opportunity. We will be embedding our outputs of the micro-credentials into lifelong learning at UCC, as I've mentioned it. And this is only possible through the collaboration, Vivian, that you have ignited through the HCI program, in particular Pillar 3 project funding system. And it's just really important that we continue to do that. I know similar developments are underway across many of our project partners. This shift within the institution has been enabled and expedited by collaboration across partner universities. One of the great initiatives that government gets to force is the wrong word maybe, but us as academics, is to enable us to work with other people. And often the best tool is used is actually, if you work with this institution, we're going to give you more money as opposed to less. PRTLI being the classic example. We changed the landscape completely, so let's do something. This also did it with micro-credentials. Let's continue to sustain that. Achieving those ambitious goals, the project of each of the universities to work closely with enterprise, to collaborate more closely with one another and indeed with enterprise. The micro-credentials has demonstrated the value of collective approach, enabling institutes to pool expertise and share the best practice and scale provision in ways that would not be possible if we were acting alone, always working together to deliver greater impact. A great example of this is between UCC, University of Galway and University of Limerick, to deliver an EDI inclusion micro-credential for a whole range of staff. And it's a great example, and some of our colleagues are in the room here today. 90 learners on track to complete a program. This initiative shows that inter-university collaboration can also support critical societal priorities. While we made great progress, however, there's still a long road ahead, and I think we've got a good sense of that from the conversation we've just had. There's a huge scale of ambition. We all want to do this. Now as required as the lifelong learning nationally depends on a deep and sustained collaboration across the wider system, has been referenced earlier. Only through shared ownership and coordinated action can we enable a broader participation and foster a culture of lifelong learning for those in the work, between jobs, and those with no jobs, and those with and without prior education. Prior education, and Paul, I think you referenced RPL. That's another really important part of this agenda, and those with further greater opportunities. And I think we really want to salute what Vivian has said earlier also, the global perspective of this. I know that when I was, and all of us are traveling, when you mention micro-credentials, people say, what's that? In other parts of the world. So those of you that were at the front end of this, and Lynn, you led out on this in the beginning, you've had a very significant impact on the whole system, not just in this country, but beyond. And I think we should take huge pride in that. We often kill ourselves for bad things we do. This is a case where we've done fantastic work. Well, you've all done fantastic work. So there are greater opportunities. So in closing, as we approach the micro-credential close with the project, we're at a pivotal moment. MicroCreds has clearly moved us beyond the proof of concept. The delivery model works, learners and employability will cooperate and work together, and demand exists. And universities together, we have demonstrated that it's now possible to do it at scale. However, delivery should not be confused with transformation. There's much more work to be done in terms of the kinds of things that Vivian mentioned, and it was referenced a moment ago. I think, Kevin, you said we don't have we look like we're poor performing in numbers. I suspect we're performing really well, but we haven't managed ourselves to connect the data together so that we can give to the HEA to show the numbers. I think the funding piece and flexible learners, and I think it's just us working together with the HEA and other partners to ensure that we put the infrastructure and indeed the funding in place to enable that to happen. Mainstreaming the microcredential will require alignment across the policy area, the funding area, and the institutional operating models. And as Paul noted earlier, many of our funding and policy mechanisms, and indeed our universities themselves, are often designed for full-time students, first-time students, and it's even the culture of all of us thinking about students today. And I was at a meeting yesterday afternoon about a student accommodation. And again, the mindset slips back into undergraduate student accommodation. But actually, postgraduate student accommodation is a completely different kind of proposition. So we've got to start changing our mindsets all the time and focus on, somebody mentioned earlier, the learner. What is their learner needs? What are they? And who are they? And what are their diversity of needs? So I think we're really in a really very special place, but a place of responsibility. Without effective alignment of all the kinds of things that Vivian has mentioned, I think that Lynn has mentioned from the QQI, if we don't align all of those, and together what we're doing in the universities, we won't succeed. But I'm confident we will, because of the work that all of you have done today. So on behalf of the IUA Council, can I say a huge kid and Míle Fáilte, first of all. Secondly, can I say Corgardicus? Can I say thank you for every single one of you for the extraordinary work that you've done. Particularly those who are at the heart of the MicroCreds team, along with the project teams, the IUA registrars, the project steering group, the enterprise advisory groups, and recognise the HEA's vision in supporting the innovation that has enabled this real change. As we move beyond the project phase, let's continue those partnerships. Let's continue to keep those learners in mind. And remember, the world is changing at pace. But I'm confident that our institutions will stick that pace and actually shape that future. We're not bystanders in the future. We can shape it. Let's make it a better future. Go míle maith, and thank you very much, everyone.